Mark of the Beast, Part 10, The Moneychangers. Just as predicted in Revelation chapter 17, the world today is coming together with one mind. It says in verse 13, "These are of one mind and give over their power and authority to the beast or to the government." The waters that you saw where the harlot is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Being of one mind, they are giving over their royal power to the beast. This global movement is no accident, but rather is being done under the careful guidance of so-called elites who wish to re-establish a union of church and state to gain ultimate control. That totalitarian system has existed for thousands of years and appears to be making a resurgence in these last days. Revelation 13 describes a situation that we're watching take place before our eyes today. Revelation 13 says, "Then I saw another beast, which rose out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. It works great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of men. And by the signs which it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, bidding them make an image for the beast, which was wounded by the sword and yet lived, and it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast should even speak, and to cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name." In a discussion about Mark of the Beast, we cannot overemphasize the god known as money. Money is power and control. Buying and selling means life and death. In this section, we will see how important it is for anyone wishing to control the world to hijack the Earth's money supply. A one-world cashless currency could certainly usher in a system of forced pagan worship on a scale that we have not seen since the Roman Empire, or what Revelation calls the first beast. Shortly after World War I, President Wilson wrote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country." He gave himself this harsh evaluation mainly because he allowed the creation of the Federal Reserve. He expounded on this non-governmental cartel takeover, writing, quote, "A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." The Federal Reserve, or a central banking system, was fiercely opposed by Presidents Lincoln, who was shot, Garfield, who was shot, and Jackson, who was attempted to be shot twice, but both guns misfired. This private central bank scheme was tenaciously attempted and thwarted for over 100 years until Wilson. Its story, however, is never taught in history class. The central banking cartel's Federal Reserve scheme may have remained a secret to this day, except that 20 years after signing the Federal Reserve Act, Citibank President Frank Vanderlip came clean in an autobiographical article in the Saturday Evening Post, where he said, "There was an occasion, near the close of 1910, when I was as secretive, indeed as furtive, as any conspirator. I do not feel it is an exaggeration to speak of our secret expedition to Jekyll Island as the occasion of the actual conception of the Federal Reserve System." The entire story of how banksters Vanderlip, Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Aldrich, and Warburg tricked President Wilson into making their banking cartel constitutional, alongside their other deceptions, can be found in great detail in Edward G. Griffin's book, Creature from Jekyll Island. Suffice it to say, the legacy of this world-changing event lives on to this day, with Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke returning to Jekyll Island to celebrate the Federal Reserve's 100-year centennial in 2010. The significance of these private bankers turning their cartel agreement into law is summarized by Joseph Plummer in the book Tragedy and Hope 101. Quote, "They can now create, destroy, and direct as much money as they see fit. They currently earn interest on every single dollar in existence, because every single dollar in existence has been created and loaned to the economy by them." With the power to print trillions of dollars at will, it is easy to understand why no one dares to criticize this beast. Indeed, Wilson remarked of this hidden hand of power that it was too big to jail. He said, quote, "Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." Sadly, this pervasive power is what put Wilson into the White House to begin with, and he regrettably did their bidding, making an image for the beast, one that has a Masonic pyramid, an all-seeing eye, and says Novus Ordo Seclorum, or New World Order, on it. Wilson was also tricked into collecting temporary federal taxes, not unlike the 666 talents that Solomon levied in 1 Kings chapter 10 verse 14. This was to cover the cost of foreign entanglements. Wilson, after having campaigned on the idea of keeping the United States out of World War I, sent U.S. troops to Europe in order to protect the bankers who had loaned money to the British and the French. Wilson's final act was the League of Nations, a plan for a new world order that would clear a way for the United Nations and NATO. New World Order proponent H.G. Wells had this to say of the remorseful President Wilson, quote, "He ceased to be a common statesman. He became a messiah." From the perspective of the money changers, with whom Wells shared beliefs about shaping the world, Wilson couldn't have done a better job of bringing us closer to their utopia. Yes, money changers have been with us since the time of Jesus and before that, literally making money out of nothing. This is really no exaggeration, especially in our day, since the principle of fractional lending allows banks to lend and collect interest on 10 times the amount in their reserves. This is the reason why a bank run results in financial collapse and depression. Of all the evil people that Jesus encountered in the Gospels, the money changers were the only group that he physically attacked. John chapter 2 verse 15 says, "And making a whip of cords, he drove them all, with the sheep and oxen, out of the temple, and he poured out the coins of the money changers, and overturned their tables." Mammon is truly the preferred form of idolatry we find in the New Testament. Jesus splits no hairs when he says flatly, "You cannot serve God and mammon." In the beginning of our study, we discussed how covetousness and idolatry are actually one and the same. In the New Testament, we see the example of Ephesus. This was a city whose main industry revolved around idolatry. We know that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And today's economy is no different. The small-time money changers of Jesus' time have become literal alchemists and wizards in our age, cooking up currency fiat schemes and creating money out of thin air. In today's economic system, the ones who rule the planet are literally these money changers, called international bankers, merchant bankers, investment bankers. These are the new den of thieves that have no country but that rule the world. If we are not careful, we can fall into the same morally ambiguous trap that the money changers have found themselves in. If we invest in Babylon by purchasing stock in weapons of destruction, in fleshly entertainment, in drugs, and in debt and misery, we should remember that the frenzied Babylon trading market in Revelation chapter 18 is responsible for the blood of all who have been slain on earth. This is no exaggeration, for we know that the prophets of money come from the profits of misery. We should consider whether it is becoming of a member of the body of Christ to profit from other people's misery. After all, weapons, drugs, and debt are some of the biggest money makers in our portfolios. And to be profitable, arms sales require war. Drugs sales require the creation of disease. And money and banking and finance require the creation of debt. Perhaps it is time for us to diversify. We know that Babylon futures are falling fast. Money is, after all, the falsest of false gods. A dollar is a debt. It is an IOU. And since the 1970s, it is all fiat currency, printed at will, lent out in amounts vastly larger than all resources in existence to ever pay it back. Beyond nothing, it is a black hole. The Bible succinctly sums up the unfathomable situation that exists today. In Proverbs chapter 27, verse 20, it says, "Hell and destruction are never satisfied, and never satisfied are the eyes of men." There is actually 60 times more debt in the world than there are goods and services in all of existence. When the Babylon market crashes in a single hour, we are told in Revelation 18 verse 19, do we really want to be under that heap of ruins? Do we want all our hopes and dreams and future plans to be like a great millstone which an angel casts into the sea? Verse 21. Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Let us rather keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he said, "I will never fail you nor forsake you." The principle of banking relies on usury, or the loaning of money at interest. Usury was actually against the law in the Old Testament. Yet nowadays most people would not consider it immoral. In the 18th century, however, money changers or bankers hit a new moral low, starting with the Napoleonic Wars, when international banking families like the Rothschilds actually lent money to both sides of the war, while using fake news to manipulate the stock markets in London. As kings and queens went further into debt, financing their side of the war, the money changers, on the other hand, took their money and, in effect, took their places as the new royalty. And for historians who follow the money, it is obvious that they have run almost every facet of our political world over the last century. This International Royalties Council on Foreign Relations, which gave birth to the United Nations, was able to operate in total secrecy for decades, while at the very same time producing the majority of our State Department leaders and driving the direction of our country. Whether they were Democrat or Republican did not matter. Their chosen direction is always toward world government, universal courts and laws, and ever more control and money poured into international banking systems like the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements. Not just centralized banks for countries, like the Federal Reserve is, but centralized banks for the entire Earth, like the World Bank. As we will eventually see in our open conspiracy chapter, this enemy of nationalism, this enemy of freedom, of human rights, an enemy of God himself, has now surfaced and is in plain view. No longer a conspiracy theory, the agendas of the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum at Davos, and to a certain extent, even the agendas of the ultra-secretive Bilderberg Group are now naked and on display for any concerned individual to see. At this point, your ignorance is truly ignorance. It is a willful choice now to be herded into the neo-feudalism that they are finally enacting after a century of planning. Shockingly, even after the history of many presidents meeting their demise going up against these banking cartels, we have two recent presidential candidates, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, which have mustered the courage to at least say, "End the Federal Reserve." This has led some observers to wonder if there are still chinks in the world controller's armor and still ways at getting at this system. President John F. Kennedy said that the word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. He went on to describe how everything has been hijacked by hidden conspirators. Quote, "For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, subversion instead of elections, intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations." Kennedy did not have time to name the members of this monolithic and ruthless conspiracy, but Congressman Larry McDonald named one of them in 1976, just before his accidental plane crash death. Quote, "The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies is to create a one-world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control." Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. End quote. In school, you and I are taught that capitalism and communism are opposites. But in reality, one world controllers know that communism means no more competition or market volatility to have to worry about. Indeed, David Rockefeller's penchant for communism is obvious in a 1973 New York Times op-ed where he writes, quote, "The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history." This was a bold statement, considering that Mao's Great Leap Forward social experiment actually resulted in the deaths of 60 million in camps and from starvation. We'll discuss the Rockefeller Foundation's obsession with population numbers in a future chapter. The Chase Manhattan chairman David Rockefeller was well aware of the accusations that many people like Congressman McDonald leveled against him, despite the army of public relations spin doctors who portrayed him as a philanthropic saint. Rockefeller wrote in his memoirs, quote, "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it." Ironically, it is Mr. Rockefeller's banking system, Chase Manhattan, which has recently sent me a card that has the new chip, where I only need to wave my hand to pay. According to the prophet Daniel, the kingdoms of the earth will stand as one when Christ returns. This is in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. The one mind of globalist humanism is also mentioned in the book of Revelation, chapter 17. Unifying countries into regions and regions into a one world order is the globalist plan, and it seems to be progressing well. In 1994, a full-page ad in the New York Times bragged about and summarized Rockefeller's achievements. 1994, the IMF and the World Bank. 1945, San Francisco, the United Nations. 1994, Marrakesh, the World Trade Organization, the third pillar of the New World Order, along with the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund. As Richard Gardner, advisor to President Carter, wrote in the Council on Foreign Relations journal called Foreign Affairs, quote, "In short, the House of World Order will have to be built from the bottom up, and end run around national sovereignty. Eroding it, piece by piece, will accomplish much more than old-fashioned frontal assaults." Even Ronald Reagan famously said, "But no national currency will do. Only a world currency will work." Most people are aware of PayPal's and Facebook's recent attempts at owning the global currency. Microsoft just filed for its 666 patent, which enables exchanges of cryptocurrencies by using a person's biometrics and bioresponses as identification instead of passwords or complex codes. For the purposes of this study, this should call to mind Revelation 13, the 666 mentioned, a mysterious passage that no one has satisfactorily explained. Our rule of thumb for this class is to let the Bible interpret itself. It is interesting to note that the number 666 only occurs one other time in the Bible, where it refers to tribute. Tribute, or taxes and fees, is definitely something that a beast or an empire or a government misses out on when people use cash a lot. Part of the motivation for using a mark of the beast type system is to regain those taxes, tributes, fees, licenses, etc. No empire likes its subjects using cash because the tax money lost out on every under-the-table transaction. Aadhaar, the cashless system running in India, is there to make sure that no exchange of credits happens without the bank's knowledge. Aadhaar uses biometrics, the scanning of the face, eyes, and fingerprints, as well as personal identification. Without enrollment into the Aadhaar system, citizens are unable to access government benefits or programs like food stamps and unemployment and government jobs. Aadhaar is being rolled out in conjunction with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Gavi vaccine program in order to register, identify, and track 1 billion Indian citizens for the purpose of mandatory vaccination. This vaccine record is in a computer chip in the baby's necklace, but will soon become a glass tattoo implanted under the skin, developed at MIT. As tracking and tracing becomes a new wave of requisite for travel and shopping, as shown in this Ticketmaster example, we might be finding ourselves currently on the verge of a big decision. Revelation chapter 14 verse 9 says, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he shall drink the wine of God's wrath, poured, unmixed, into the cup of his anger." In China, cash is all but disappeared, with even beggars using Alibaba, the digital cashless system. The push for Real ID in the United States means biometric artificial intelligence identities for Americans. Cash, or at least coins here, have been pronounced dirty lately in light of our new normal age, with coins going extinct thanks to the cooperation of the Federal Reserve. The frenzied push for one chip to rule them all has taken off in countries such as Estonia, where everything to do with finances, medical records, and government records are combined together in a single chip. Every vote, signature, license, bill, checkup, etc. is done in cyberspace in Estonia. If not, the e-police will intercept you. They even have a biobank which collects and owns your DNA. Naturally, no one can buy or sell without the chip in these prototype countries. And if you find you've already have everything in one single chip on a card, why not just take the small step to insert that chip into your hand? This, too, is being done voluntarily so far in countries like Sweden, which is also nearly cashless. Even in America, several corporations offer this chipping service to their employees. "I have the chip" is a refrain that I have been using for years at the grocery store in America, as people around me insert their chips to pay. And like I said, for those with Rockefeller's Chase Visa card, the insertion of the card is giving way to a mere waving of the right hand. As we watch the literal fulfillment of the mark of the beast enacted, we can take heart that the golden-headed Babylon's days are near their end. But will we have the endurance of the saints who conquer to make it through? So, then, blessed are you who wash your robes, that you have the right to the tree of life, and that you may enter into the city gates of New Jerusalem. Because outside are the dogs, and the sorcerers, or the pharmakia, and the fornicators, and murderers, and idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood.